Dear young brothers and sisters of the new generation of Hindustan, Namaskar. In the last 3 episodes, we have seen the brutal killing or genocide of millions and millions of the citizens of Hindustan by the British by imposing artificial and intentionally planned famines by exporting the whole food from Hindustan to Britain and to the European countries. We have seen testimonies and affirmations confirming this fact. The Arabs and Mughals also killed millions of the citizens of Hindustan, but in their case, it was by cutting the throats. So the death was instant, maybe a couple of minutes sufferance or even less. But the method by which the British killed millions of innocent citizens of Hindustan was through starvation, which was more terrible and more painful than any other way of death. This is one of the fundamental facts. In today's episode, let us review some of the other examples of the barbarism, crimes, and inhuman brutalities which the British committed in Hindustan. Here are some of the other examples of British barbarism and brutality. After kneeling before the emperor for a permission to enter in Hindustan for the trade, once established the trade, further to the brutal, horrible, as well as criminal exploitation of Hindustan, the British practiced all possible crimes cold-bloodedly to suppress the freedom of expression of the citizens of Hindustan. And the method practiced was invading everywhere they could, spreading panic and terrifying situations in every part of the nation, and creating such a horrible situation and putting the population in panic so that they couldn't do practically anything. Watch this painting or this representation. See how they commanded, how they tied the people and inhibited or suppressed all sorts of attempt to express any resistance. And if you watch closely, you can see citizens of Hindustan who were hanged on these tall trees. Here we can see what these people of high culture and civilization practiced in Hindustan. They ordered all the local rulers to surrender one by one. Otherwise, the only option was death, because these people who came to Hindustan disguising as traders, they brought, as you have seen in the last episode, enough soldiers and weapons. So these local rulers couldn't resist anymore. Here are some other examples of British barbarism and brutality and crimes they have practiced in Hindustan. 1. Soldiers of East India Company chopped off the thumbs of skilled weavers so that they couldn't practice any more of the craft which they knew, and thereby the whole textile industries were destroyed. 2. The suppression of the resistance in 1857, which ended up with hundreds of Hindustan citizens blown to bits from the mouth of cannons. Please note, people blown to bits from the mouth of cannons, and others hanged from public gobbets. Women and children were massacred, and over 100,000 people were killed. Here we have a clear explanation. What does it mean, blowing to bits from the mouth of cannons? That is, the prisoner is tied to a gun or a cannon with the upper part of his back resting against the mouth of the cannon. When the gun is fired, his head is seen to go straight up into the air some 40 or 50 feet. The arms fly off right and left, high up in the air, and fall at perhaps 100 yards distance. The legs drop to the ground beneath the muzzle, that is the tube of the cannon or the gun, and the body is literally blown away altogether, not even a vestige or a trace being seen. And this is an affirmation of the historian George Carter's tent. Can you imagine such a brutal crime could be practiced by soldiers of a nation which pretended to be the most cultured and civilized in the world? Just think and reflect. Remember these facts just to become patriotic. If you don't know the history of your ancestors, you can never be faithful to them and you can never be proud of your origin, because Hindustan still resisted all those sufferings, and that is the merit. So this is the intention behind revealing all these hidden pages of the true history of Hindustan. Please take note of this fact. Here we have a clear scene, and this is a photograph, not at all a painting. What does it mean by blowing to bits from the mouth of the cannons? See, cannons were arranged in this way. Those who were hauled off by the British were tied to the cannons in this way, and when the cannon is fired, as we have seen, the body is literally blown off without even leaving a trace. Just imagine. Another example of the British barbarism or crime which they practiced in Hindustan is the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. Here we have a description of the tragedy of Jallianwala Bagh. It is on April 13, the traditional festival of Baisakhi. Thousands of Sikhs, Muslims and Hindus gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh garden in Amritsar. An hour after the meeting began, as scheduled, at 4:30 p.m., General Dyer, without warning the crowd to disperse, blocked the main exits. He explained later that this act was not to disperse the meeting, but to punish the Indians for disobedience. Dyer ordered his troops to begin shooting towards the densest section of the crowd, including women and children. Firing continued for approximately 10 minutes. Many people died in the stampedes at the narrow gates or by jumping into the solitary well on the compound to escape the shooting. A plaque in the monument at this site, set up after independence, says that 120 bodies were pulled out of the well. The wounded could not be moved from where they had fallen, as a curfew was declared, and many more died during the night. About this tragedy of Jallianwala Bagh, we were informed superficially only in our social studies classes in our schools. We were not made understand the real tragic situations which the citizens of Hindustan had to face in Jallianwala Bagh. Okay, it was mentioned because it could not be hidden so easily. That's not the reason, nothing else. And now you have seen how much tragic it was. Let us see some other photographs of the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. This is a real photograph. It's not a painting of the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy or massacre on April 13th, 1919. Just watch another scene of the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. Again, another photograph of the same tragic event which Hindustan had to face. And here is the great cultured civilized man of Britain, General Reginald Dyer, the butcher of Amritsar. And here is the tombstone of the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy. This place is saturated with the blood of thousands of Indian patriots who were martyred in a non-violent struggle to free India from British domination. General Dyer of the British Army opened fire here on unarmed people. Jallianwala Bagh is thus an everlasting symbol of the non-violent and peaceful struggle for freedom of Indian people and the tyranny of the British. See, I said the word tombstone intentionally because if you just go to Google and type tombstones for fireflies, you will see an animated cartoon which is Japanese and which is intended for children of 3 to 5 years. And that cartoon or animated cartoon, a film, explains the terrible suffering of the Japanese people during the Second World War and also the tragedy of the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This means that by the time the children start going to school, they know very well the sufferance of their ancestors. One of the main reasons why the Japanese are the most patriotic and most proudful of their nation. How many of our citizens are so proudful and without any sort of inferiority complex as the Japanese? And this is the reason why I mentioned tombstone of the Jallianwala Bagh sufferance or episode. Understanding or knowing about the possibility to enter in Hindustan and loot the remained wealth, many from other European countries such as Holland, France, etc. came to Hindustan to establish their own East India companies. But neither the British nor the Portuguese permitted those people to remain long in Hindustan. Let us see who were those people came and tried to establish their own East India companies in Hindustan. Other East India companies, the provenience were different, but the objective was unique. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company. Then in 1616, the Danish East India Company. 1628 came again the Portuguese East India Company, even though they came previously in 1948 and destroyed the whole Goa. In 1664, the French East India Company, which could resist a little more than the other East India companies. And in 1731 came the Swedish to establish their own East India Company. The vast majority of these details or the pages of the true history of Hindustan was intentionally hidden by the central governments which came to existence since 1947. This is a fact. Please share these episodes to your friends and relatives of the new generation so that they will pass to the next generations and people will understand the past. They know they belonged or they belong to a nation which was the richest in the world until 1600. And they will know also how our great nation survived all these disasters. And once they understand the truth and once they know, once they see the hidden pages of the true history of Hindustan, they will become more patriotic. So, thank you very much for your kind attention to my words. See you in the next episode. Jai Hind.